They mocked the black maid for carrying cheap perfume until the Mafia boss revealed it was his mother's scent. Alicia Davis had spent years working as a maid in the grand estate of the Castellano family. She was quiet, humble, and always tried to stay out of the spotlight. But that night, it seemed as though the spotlight had found her in the worst way. As she made her way through the ballroom, carrying a tray of drinks, she could feel the eyes of the guests on her. Their whispers grew louder, and then, like a wave crashing over her, she heard one of them, Jenna, sneer. "Ugh, look at her. Can't even afford decent perfume. What is that smell? It's so cheap." Thomas, standing beside Jenna, chuckled, his voice dripping with mockery. "Must be some bargain bin fragrance. I bet she found it in the dollar store." Alicia's cheeks burned. She tried to ignore them, keeping her head down, focusing on the tray she carried, but it was impossible. The cruel laughter followed her, filling the air with shame. Alicia had never been one to stand up for herself. She was used to the whispers, the looks, the judgments. It came with the job. But tonight was different. Tonight, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was the last straw. As she passed by, her hands trembling, Alicia heard another voice join in, this time from David, another guest. "She doesn't even deserve to be here." What a joke. The words cut deeper than she expected. Alicia's throat tightened, her eyes threatening to water. She had worked so hard, sacrificed so much to be here, to make a living. And this was the thanks she got? But just as the laughter grew louder, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The door at the far end of the room opened, and in stepped Dominic Castellano, the head of the family. The room fell silent. He was known for his cold demeanor, his power that commanded respect. But tonight, something about him felt different. His sharp eyes scanned the room, landing on Alicia. She froze, wondering if he had heard the mocking comments. His gaze was intense, searching, and for a brief moment, Alicia thought she might have been dismissed, that she would be sent away. But to her surprise, Dominic made his way toward her, his tall figure cutting through the crowd like a blade. The guests parted for him, and the whispers died down. As he approached, Alicia's heart raced. "Alicia," he said, his voice low but commanding. "What is that fragrance you're wearing?" Alicia's breath caught in her throat. She had never expected him to acknowledge her. She hesitated for a moment. Then, with trembling hands, she replied, It's just a cheap perfume, sir." Dominic studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a surprising softness in his voice, he said, "It's my mother's scent." The room went dead silent. The guests looked at each other, confused, as Dominic continued. "My mother used to wear this perfume. She never could afford the luxury ones, but it was always hers. The scent reminds me of her, of the love she gave me." He turned to face the guests, his eyes narrowing. "So, if anyone here has a problem with Alicia's perfume, then you have a problem with me." The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one dared to speak. Dominic's power was undeniable, and with a simple declaration, he had turned the situation on its head. Alicia, still in shock, felt her body relax for the first time that evening. The cruel laughter was gone, replaced by a sense of calm. She had been seen, respected. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't invisible, that she mattered. Dominic gave Alicia a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that she wasn't alone. And as he walked away, the room slowly returned to its normal pace, but the energy had shifted. The guests, who had once mocked Alicia, now looked at her with a newfound respect. The twist had come, and it was clear, justice had been served. The evening was unusually quiet after Dominic's declaration. The whispers that once filled the room now felt distant, muffled by the heavy weight of his words. Alicia stood frozen for a moment, unsure whether she had truly heard him right. Had the Mafia boss just defended her? Had he truly just revealed something so personal about his mother in front of all these people? She had always been invisible in these grand settings, just another worker, doing her job without being noticed. But tonight, it was different. For the first time, Alicia felt as though she had been seen, not just as a maid, but as a person, a human, being worthy of respect. She tried to steady her breath, feeling her chest rise and fall as the weight of the moment settled in. The harsh looks from earlier were replaced by uncertainty and a sense of discomfort among the guests. It was as if the room itself had shifted, no longer a place where the powerful could mock the weak without consequence. Alicia glanced around. Some of the guests avoided her gaze, but a few seemed to look at her with something new in their eyes. Perhaps respect, perhaps guilt. It didn't matter. What mattered was that they had seen her, and for once, it wasn't through the lens of disdain. The night continued, but the tension had loosened. The food was served, the wine poured, and yet Alicia's mind couldn't fully focus. Every time her hand reached for another tray, she found herself looking over at Dominic. He was seated at the head of the table now, surrounded by his trusted associates, speaking quietly, but his eyes occasionally flicked toward her. He hadn't forgotten her. For reasons she couldn't quite understand, Alicia felt an odd connection to him. The way he had stood up for her, the way he had spoken about his mother, it wasn't something she could easily shake. As the evening wore on, Dominic rose from his seat. His towering figure commanded attention, and the room fell silent once more as he moved through the crowd. Alicia couldn't help but watch him. He was unlike anyone she had ever met. Powerful, untouchable, and yet, there was something in his eyes that seemed human. As he passed by her, he stopped, just for a moment. Their eyes met, and for the first time that night, Alicia saw something other than coldness in his gaze. It was a quiet understanding, as if he could see through her, beyond the uniform and the role she played. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Alicia swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, sir." He nodded, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Good. Stay strong." Then he was gone, blending back into the crowd. Alicia stood there, her mind racing. Stay strong? She had never thought of herself that way. She had always just survived, always just done what was expected of her. But Dominic's words lingered in her mind, and in that brief moment of eye contact, she felt something she had never felt before, a spark of hope. Hope that she could be more than just a maid. Hope that, perhaps, she could stand tall in a world that had always made her feel small. The night wore on, but Alicia's thoughts were elsewhere. As the final course was served, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within her. The guests slowly filtered out of the room, their laughter and chatter fading into the distance. But Alicia remained behind, finishing her duties, collecting the empty glasses and plates. She was almost done when she heard footsteps approaching again. She turned, expecting to see one of the other staff members, but it was Dominic. He had returned, and this time, he wasn't surrounded by anyone. Just him. He walked up to her slowly, his presence filling the room. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Dominic broke the quiet. "Alicia, I wanted to thank you," he said, his tone sincere. Alicia blinked, caught off guard. "Thank me, sir." "For your strength," he replied, his voice steady. "Not everyone would have kept their composure tonight. You did well." She felt her cheeks flush, the praise unexpected and overwhelming. She had always been taught to stay quiet, to stay out of the way. To hear someone, especially someone like Dominic, acknowledge her strength was a shock. "It's nothing, sir," she replied softly. "Just doing my job." Dominic's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, Alicia saw a flicker of something in him, something she couldn't quite place. "No," he said, shaking his head slightly. "It's not nothing. You matter." The words were simple, but they hit Alicia harder than she expected. She had always felt invisible in this world, but here, in this moment, Dominic Castellano had made her feel seen. And for the first time in a long time, Alicia allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was more than just a maid. As Dominic turned to leave, he paused at the door, glancing back at her. "Stay strong, Alicia," he repeated, and with that, he was gone. Alicia stood there, her heart racing, as the weight of his words settled into her chest. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of pride swelling inside her. The night had started, with mockery and shame, but it was ending with something much more powerful, self-respect. And maybe, just maybe, a glimpse of something more. She wasn't just a maid. She was Alicia Davis, and tonight, she had been seen. The next few days passed in a blur for Alicia. She had always kept her distance from the world of the Castellanos, but now, after Dominic's unexpected support, things felt different. She moved through the mansion's grand halls with a new sense of purpose. She no longer felt like an invisible servant. She felt like someone who had been seen. The guests who had once mocked her now avoided her eyes, a sense of unease lingering in the air when she passed by. She couldn't help but wonder what they must have been thinking. Had Dominic's intervention truly changed their perception of her, or were they simply too intimidated to speak? The thought both comforted and unsettled her. Alicia spent the following days focusing on her work, but she could not stop thinking about Dominic. His words had left a lasting impact on her. "You matter." She repeated them to herself, almost as if they were a mantra, trying to absorb the truth behind them. But no matter how many times she told herself that she mattered, doubts crept in. She had spent so many years learning to be invisible, to fade into the background, that now, standing in the light of Dominic's attention, it felt almost impossible to believe. That evening, after the usual bustle of dinner service had died down, Alicia found herself standing in the grand kitchen, cleaning up after the last of the guests had left. The house had fallen silent, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the stillness. She was wiping down the counters when she heard the familiar sound of footsteps. She froze, recognizing the gate immediately. Dominic. He was walking toward her, his presence as commanding as ever. Her heart skipped a beat. She had told herself she wouldn't let her thoughts drift to him. She had no right to expect anything from him. He was the Mafia boss, and she was just the maid. But there he was, approaching her, his dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. "Alicia," he said, his voice calm but steady. "I hope you're doing all right after the other night." She nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes, sir. I'm fine, thank you." Dominic studied her for a moment, his gaze softening. "Good. I meant what I said. You handled yourself well. Not everyone could have stayed composed like that." Alicia felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words, but she couldn't help the small voice of doubt that whispered in the back of her mind. I don't know what to say." She felt awkward, unsure of how to respond to such praise. She had always been the one to keep her head down, never expecting anything from anyone, especially not from someone like him. Dominic gave her a small, reassuring smile. "There's no need to say anything. I just wanted to check in. You've been through a lot more than people realize, Alicia. You deserve to be treated with respect." His words hit her harder than she expected. She had never allowed herself to believe she deserved respect. Not when she had been treated like a shadow, a servant with no voice, no value beyond the work she did. But here was Dominic, the head of the Castellano family, telling her that she was worth something, that she mattered. The emotion threatened to overwhelm her, but she fought it back, unwilling to let her vulnerability show. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic nodded and stepped closer, his presence filling the space between them. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence heavy with unspoken understanding. Then, to Alicia's surprise, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. He held it out to her. "I know it's not much," he said, his tone soft, "but I want you to have this." Alicia blinked, confused. She looked down at the small object in his hand. It was a bottle of perfume, elegant, understated, with a deep, rich scent that immediately felt familiar. "This was my mother's," Dominic explained, his voice steady. "She always wore it, and I thought you might like it. It's something I've kept for years, but I think it's time it found its way to someone who truly deserves it." Alicia's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to give her something so personal, so meaningful. It was as if he was offering her more than just a gift. He was offering her a piece of his world, a world she had never thought she would be a part of. Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible as she took the perfume from his hand. The weight of it in her palm was both heavy and comforting, a symbol of everything that had changed in her life in the past few days. For the first time, Alicia felt a sense of pride in who she was. She had been seen by Dominic, and in that moment, she felt as though she could finally see herself. As Dominic turned to leave, he glanced back at her, his eyes soft. "Remember, Alicia, you matter. Don't ever forget that." And with that, he walked out of the kitchen, leaving Alicia standing there, the perfume in her hand, and a newfound sense of hope blossoming in her chest. She had spent so many years feeling small, but tonight, for the first time, she felt powerful. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was someone who had been recognized, someone who mattered. And that realization, more than anything else, made her heart swell with a quiet, unshakable confidence. Alicia stood still in the kitchen, the small perfume bottle in her hand, her fingers tracing its smooth surface. She had never imagined something like this would happen to her. A gift from Dominic. Something that had belonged to his mother. It was a strange, beautiful gesture that left her speechless. She had always worked in the shadows, never expecting to be treated as anything more than a servant. But Dominic's kindness, his recognition of her, had changed everything. It was as if a door had opened in her life, one she had never noticed before. For the first time, Alicia allowed herself to feel what she had buried deep inside for so long: hope. The next few days were a blur for Alicia. She continued her work in the grand Castellano estate, but now there was a quiet confidence in her every step. She carried herself differently, as though the weight of the past had been lifted, even if just a little. She had been seen, and it made all the difference. But despite the changes, there was still a lingering feeling in her heart. She wasn't sure what to do with it. Was this a momentary kindness, something Dominic would forget about when the next business deal came along? Or had something shifted for him too? Alicia didn't know, but she couldn't ignore the warmth that still filled her chest when she thought about him. Every time she passed by Dominic in the halls, he would acknowledge her with a nod, a smile. It was subtle, but it was enough to remind her that she had not been forgotten. One evening, as Alicia was finishing up her duties in the main dining room, the sound of footsteps drew her attention. She looked up to see Dominic walking toward her, his usual confident stride cutting through the room. This time, there was no crowd around him, just him and his quiet presence. As he approached, Alicia's heart skipped a beat. He stopped in front of her, his gaze meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Dominic's voice broke the silence. "How are you, Alicia?" The question was simple, yet there was an underlying sincerity in his tone that caught her off guard. Alicia swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper as she replied, "I'm doing well, thank you, sir." Dominic's expression softened, and he took a step closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I've been watching you," he said. "You've been handling everything with grace. I admire that." Alicia felt a rush of warmth spread through her. She had never expected to hear words like this from someone like Dominic. "Thank you, sir," she said, her heart racing. Dominic nodded, as if weighing his next words carefully. "I wanted to tell you something. I know it's not much, but I've noticed how hard you've worked here. You've earned more than just my respect. You've earned my trust." Alicia felt the weight of his words sink in. It was one thing to be respected, but to have someone like Dominic Castellano trust her, it was beyond anything she had ever imagined. She stood there, unsure of how to respond, but Dominic continued. "I'm giving you a new role here, Alicia. I think you're ready for more responsibility." Alicia blinked, trying to process what he had just said. A new role? She had never imagined that she would be given more than the menial tasks she had always performed. "What do you mean, sir?" she asked, her voice shaky with surprise. Dominic smiled faintly. "You've shown more than just competence, Alicia. You've shown something that most people in this house lack: integrity. And I need people I can trust." Alicia's heart raced as she processed his words. Was this really happening? Was she really being given a chance? "Thank you, sir," she said, barely able to find the words. Dominic's smile deepened, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that she hadn't before: genuine warmth. "You've earned it," he said simply. "I know you'll do great things." As Dominic turned and walked away, Alicia stood frozen in the middle of the room, her mind reeling. She had always been invisible, just another part of the background in the Castellano estate. But now, she had been seen. She had been given a chance to prove herself, and for the first time, Alicia believed she could. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of new responsibilities for Alicia. She found herself managing the staff, organizing events, and handling tasks she never thought she would be trusted with. It wasn't easy, but it was fulfilling. And every time Dominic walked past her, his nod of approval reminded her that she was doing the right thing. As she stood in the grand dining hall one evening, overseeing the preparations for a high-profile event, Alicia couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had worked hard to get to this point, and now she was here, leading, organizing, and being respected for the first time in her life. Just as the last guests were arriving for the event, Alicia caught sight of Dominic across the room. He was speaking with a few associates, but his eyes found hers. He gave her a small nod, and in that moment, Alicia felt something stir within her. She had made it. She had gone from being invisible to someone who mattered. And as the night continued, she realized that this was just the beginning of her journey. With Dominic's trust, with the newfound respect of those around her, Alicia Davis was no longer just the maid. She was someone with a future she could shape on her own terms. It had been several months since Alicia had been given the new responsibilities in the Castellano estate. She had grown into her role, learning the intricacies of the house, managing the staff with a newfound confidence, and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. The mansion, once an intimidating place, had now become her second home. She moved through the rooms with ease, interacting with guests, making decisions, and feeling a sense of accomplishment with every task completed. It was a far cry from the timid maid she once was. Alicia had found her place, and it felt good. She had earned respect, and it was something she no longer had to chase. It was freely given. But there were moments, quiet moments, when she would stand still in the grand halls, her hands resting on the polished wood of the banister, and wonder if this was really happening. Was she really living this life now? And then, Dominic's face would flash in her mind. The words he had spoken to her, the trust he had placed in her, those moments had shifted something inside of her. He had seen her, and in a way, that had changed everything. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky outside the windows turned a deep shade of purple, Alicia was preparing for a gala. It was an annual event that brought in high-profile guests from all over the city. She had seen many of these events come and go, always in the background, always as an observer. But tonight, things felt different. She wasn't just a bystander. She was an integral part of the evening. She was responsible for ensuring that everything ran smoothly. As she moved through the bustling kitchen, organizing the final touches for the event, she caught a glimpse of Dominic entering the room. His presence was as commanding as ever, and for a moment, Alicia felt her heart race. She had become accustomed to seeing him around, but tonight, his gaze lingered on her for just a second longer than usual. It was enough to make her pause, her breath catching in her throat. But she quickly shook off the feeling. She had a job to do. The gala began, and the guests arrived in their extravagant gowns and tailored suits, filling the mansion with the hum of laughter and conversation. Alicia moved through the crowd with purpose, her eyes scanning the room, ensuring everything was perfect. She was no longer the invisible woman in the corner. She was seen. She was a part of this world now. The evening wore on, and Alicia found herself standing near the entrance, welcoming guests as they arrived. The lights above shimmered, casting a soft glow on the marble floors, and the scent of fresh flowers filled the air. Everything was as it should be. And then, in the midst of it all, Alicia noticed Dominic again. He was standing across the room, speaking with a few guests, but his eyes found hers. Their gazes locked, and for a brief moment, the noise of the room seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them in that moment. Alicia's heart fluttered, but she quickly turned her attention back to her duties, telling herself it was nothing. It was just a fleeting moment. But Dominic's presence lingered in her mind throughout the evening. As the night drew to a close, the last of the guests began to filter out of the mansion. Alicia was overseeing the final stages of the cleanup when she heard footsteps approaching once again. She turned, already knowing who it was before she saw him. Dominic was walking toward her, a calm yet determined expression on his face. For a moment, Alicia felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. She had grown accustomed to his quiet approval, but tonight felt different. There was something about the way he was looking at her that made her heart skip a beat. "Alicia," he said softly, his voice carrying over the hum of the room. She turned to face him, a faint smile on her lips. "Yes, sir. You've done a great job tonight," he said, his voice steady and genuine. "The event went off without a hitch, and I couldn't have asked for a better person to oversee it." Alicia's chest swelled with pride. She had worked hard for this moment, and hearing his words meant more than she could express. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice full of gratitude. Dominic studied her for a moment, his eyes softening. "I've been meaning to speak with you about something," he continued, his tone lower now. "You've proven yourself time and time again, Alicia. You've earned not just my respect, but my trust." Alicia blinked, feeling the weight of his words. Trust. She had never thought much about the concept of trust before, especially when it came to someone like Dominic. But now, hearing him say it, it felt like a turning point. I don't know what to say," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't have to say anything, Dominic replied with a slight smile. I just wanted you to know that you've made a real impact here. Not just in the way you've handled your responsibilities, but in the way you've carried yourself. You've become a leader in this house, and it hasn't gone unnoticed. Alicia's heart raced. Leader. She had never imagined herself as a leader. She had spent so many years being just a servant, an unseen figure in the background. But here was Dominic, the man who had given her this opportunity, telling her that she had stepped into something much bigger. I've decided to promote you, Dominic said, his words firm. You'll be handling more of the high-level management moving forward. I trust you, Alicia. You've earned it. Alicia felt her breath catch. This was more than she had ever dreamed of. She had worked so hard for this moment, and now it was here. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I won't let you down. Dominic smiled, his eyes meeting hers with an understanding that made her feel like she was truly seen. I know you won't, he said. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Alicia standing in the grand hallway, the weight of his words settling in her chest. For the first time in her life, Alicia felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She had earned this, and nothing would stand in her way now. The weeks that followed Alicia's promotion were some of the busiest of her life. She was now in charge of more than just the daily operations. She oversaw the staff, coordinated events, and even made decisions on behalf of Dominic when he was unavailable. Her confidence grew with every task she completed, and with every challenge, she found herself rising to meet it. She had never imagined her life would take such a turn. She was no longer just the maid in the background. She was now an integral part of the Castellano estate. Every time she walked through the grand halls, her steps felt different. She carried herself with purpose, her head held high, no longer the invisible figure she once was. There were still moments, though, when she caught herself looking up at the high ceilings, wondering how she had gotten here. Was this really her life now? She had been given a chance to prove herself, and she had done just that. As the days passed, Alicia continued to earn Dominic's trust. She was no longer just his employee. She was a trusted ally, someone he could count on. She found herself working closely with him more and more. Their interactions were frequent, and each time they spoke, Alicia felt a sense of respect that she had never experienced before. Dominic had a way of making her feel like her opinions mattered. He listened to her ideas, took her suggestions seriously, and when he did speak, it was always with respect. It wasn't lost on Alicia how rare this was. In her past, she had never been treated with such consideration. She had spent years serving people who barely acknowledged her presence, and now, she was in a position where her voice was heard. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the mansion was bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, Alicia found herself standing in the garden, taking a moment to breathe. It had been another long day of planning and organizing for an upcoming event. She had worked tirelessly, and while she was used to the fast pace, it still left her feeling exhausted. The garden was quiet, peaceful, a stark contrast to the hustle of the estate. As she stood there, taking in the fragrance of the flowers, she heard footsteps approaching. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Alicia, Dominic's voice called softly. She turned to find him standing behind her, his figure framed by the warm light of the setting sun. His presence was always commanding, but there was something about the way he approached her now that felt different. He was no longer just her employer. He had become someone she could rely on, someone who had given her more than just a job. He had given her a purpose. I didn't expect to find you here, Dominic said with a small smile, his eyes locking with hers. I needed a moment, Alicia replied, her voice calm. It's been a long day. Dominic nodded, his expression thoughtful. He stepped closer, and for a moment, the space between them felt charged with something Alicia couldn't quite place. You've been doing a great job, Alicia, he said, his voice low, yet warm. I've been impressed with how well you've handled everything. I knew I made the right choice in trusting you. Alicia felt a flush rise to her cheeks at his words, but she quickly composed herself. Thank you, sir, she said, keeping her tone steady. Dominic smiled, and there was something in his gaze that made Alicia's heart race. You've earned more than just my trust, he said, his voice softer now. You've earned my respect. You're not just an employee to me anymore, Alicia. His words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Alicia's heart skipped a beat. What was this? What did it mean? She had been given so much already. Respect, trust, opportunity. But this felt different. Thank you, she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. I'm not sure what comes next, he said quietly. But I want you to know that whatever it is, I'm here for you. I trust you, Alicia, more than anyone else. Alicia felt a wave of emotion rush through her. She had never imagined she would be standing here, in this moment, with someone like Dominic. He wasn't just a boss, a powerful man. He was someone who saw her, who recognized her worth. And in that moment, Alicia realized something profound. She wasn't just a maid who had worked her way up in the world. She was someone with her own strength, her own purpose. And she didn't need to prove that to anyone but herself. As Dominic turned to leave, he paused for a moment, glancing back at her. Take care of yourself, Alicia, he said, his voice steady but full of something that felt like concern. She didn't know for sure, but it was something she had never expected from him. You've earned it. Alicia watched him walk away, the weight of his words settling deep inside her. She had earned it. And in that moment, she knew that whatever came next, she was ready. She was no longer just a maid. She was someone who mattered. And the world, for the first time, felt like it was hers to shape. Weeks passed since that pivotal evening in the garden, and Alicia felt herself becoming more accustomed to her new role. The initial sense of disbelief had worn off, replaced by a steady confidence that fueled her every decision. Dominic's trust in her had not only empowered her, but also pushed her to grow in ways she had never imagined. She was no longer just a maid or a background figure in the Castellano household. She was a leader, a respected member of the team, and someone whose opinion mattered. Every time she walked into a room, she could sense the change in how people viewed her. Gone were the whispers and condescending glances. Instead, there was respect. Her days were filled with meetings, planning, and overseeing staff, tasks she had never thought she'd be trusted with. She had learned to handle the pressure, the expectations, and even the occasional difficult guest. But there were still moments when her thoughts drifted, and she found herself questioning how far she could go. Would Dominic always be there to support her? Would she continue to be treated as an equal, or would she eventually be relegated back to the shadows of the mansion? It was on one of those rare, quiet moments that Alicia found herself in the staff quarters late one evening, going over the preparations for another upcoming event. As she sat at the small desk, writing notes, her mind wandered to the conversation she had had with Dominic in the garden. His words still lingered in her mind. You've earned it. Those words had meant more than just the promotion. They were a validation of everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed. She had spent so many years invisible, just trying to get by. Now, she was standing tall, not just in the eyes of her colleagues, but in her own eyes. As Alicia gathered the papers to head out, there was a soft knock on the door. She stood quickly, a little startled. Come in, she called. The door opened, and in walked Dominic. His presence immediately filled the room, and Alicia felt a sudden rush of nerves. It had become routine for him to check in with her, but tonight, there was something different about the way he entered. He wasn't just walking in to discuss work. There was a quiet intensity in his gaze, something Alicia hadn't seen before. Alicia, he said, his voice steady but laced with something unfamiliar. I need to talk to you about something. Alicia's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure why, but the seriousness in his tone made her feel as though something important was about to happen. Of course, sir. What's on your mind? She asked, her voice betraying none of the nervousness she was feeling. Dominic closed the door behind him and took a few steps closer, his gaze never leaving hers. You've done exceptional work since I promoted you, he began, his voice calm, but with an edge of something more. I've seen how hard you've worked, how you've handled everything with grace. You've exceeded my expectations, Alicia. Alicia felt a warm sense of pride swell in her chest. She had worked tirelessly to prove herself, and hearing Dominic acknowledge that meant everything. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that, she replied, her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly. Dominic looked at her, his eyes softening. But there's more to this. I'm not just offering you responsibility because you've done your job well. I'm offering you something that goes beyond the professional. His words sent a ripple of uncertainty through Alicia. What did he mean by that? She had already been given more than she could have imagined, more than she thought she deserved. What more could there be? What do you mean, sir? She asked, unable to hide the curiosity in her voice. Dominic paused, as though considering his words carefully. I've been thinking a lot about you, Alicia. About everything you've accomplished here. His gaze shifted, and for the first time, it didn't feel like the sharp focus she was used to. It felt more personal. I want you to know that you've become someone I can rely on, not just as an employee, but as a person. Alicia's heart raced. What was happening? Was he about to say what she thought he might? Dominic stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the quiet room. I've been thinking about what happens next for you, he continued. I think you're ready for something more. Not just in this house, but in life. Alicia felt her throat tighten. She had been given so many chances already. She couldn't help but wonder if Dominic was about to offer her something even bigger, something beyond the Castellano estate. He paused again, his gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that made Alicia's breath catch. I don't know what it will look like yet, he said, softly, but I want you to consider, really consider, what comes next. You've earned the right to decide that for yourself. I'll be here to support you, whatever path you choose. The weight of his words settled heavily on Alicia's chest. She had never imagined that this sense of agency, of control over her own future, would come from someone like Dominic. She had always been told what to do, always been guided by others. But now, Dominic was offering her the freedom to choose her next steps. It was a moment of empowerment she had never experienced before. Thank you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to say. Dominic gave her a small smile, his expression soft. You don't have to say anything right now, he said gently. Just think about it. You've earned more than you realize, Alicia. And I believe in you. As he turned to leave, Alicia remained standing there, her mind racing. She had come so far, and now, for the first time, the future was wide open to her. She didn't know what would come next, but she was no longer afraid to find out. With Dominic's support, she knew she could face whatever the future held. And for the first time, she felt ready. Ready to take the next step in her life, whatever it might be. Days passed since Dominic's offer, and Alicia found herself standing at a crossroads. Her new responsibilities at the Castellano estate had given her a sense of confidence she never thought possible, but the weight of Dominic's words still lingered in her mind. I want you to consider, really consider, what comes next for you. His invitation to think about her future was both a gift and a challenge. Alicia had always been someone who worked hard, kept her head down, and followed the path laid out for her. But now, she was being asked to take control of her own destiny. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. What did she truly want? She had worked tirelessly to get to this point, but was this all she was capable of? Was she meant to stay in this world, surrounded by power and wealth, or was there something more for her outside of it? Alicia spent the next few days reflecting on Dominic's offer. She had always been content with the stability of her job, the quiet security of her role within the estate. But now, with the freedom to choose, she found herself questioning everything she had once accepted. One evening, as she sat alone in her small office, reviewing the upcoming events for the estate, her thoughts kept returning to Dominic. His presence had become a constant in her life, and not just as a boss. He had been a mentor, a guide, and more than that, he had shown her a level of respect she had never known. It was strange how someone like him, so powerful, so distant, could have such an impact on her. But it wasn't just his words that had resonated with her, it was his actions. He had consistently shown her that she was more than just a maid. He had believed in her when no one else did, and that belief had changed everything. But as much as she valued his trust, Alicia knew she had to make a decision for herself. She couldn't rely on anyone else to shape her future. It had to be her choice. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. She looked up to see one of the staff members standing in the doorway. Miss Davis, Mr. Castellano would like to see you in his office, the staff member said, her tone respectful. Alicia nodded, her heart skipping a beat. She had seen Dominic more frequently in recent weeks, but every time he called for her, it still felt like a momentous occasion. She gathered her things and headed toward his office, the familiar hallways of the estate now feeling different to her, more like her own space, a place where she belonged. When she reached Dominic's office, she knocked softly before entering. He was sitting behind his desk, looking over some papers, but when he saw her, he set them aside and motioned for her to sit. Alicia, I wanted to check in with you, he said, his voice calm and steady. I know I asked you to think about your future, but I wanted to hear your thoughts. How are you feeling about everything? Alicia hesitated for a moment, her mind racing. She had thought about it constantly, but now that the moment was here, she felt unsure of how to put her thoughts into words. I'm grateful for everything, Dominic, she began, her voice steady but with an underlying uncertainty. I've learned so much, and I've grown in ways I never thought possible. But I keep thinking about what comes next. I know I've been given opportunities here, but I don't want to just stay where I am. I want to do something more, something that matters to me, not just to the estate. Dominic listened intently, his expression softening as she spoke. I understand, he said, his voice low and sincere. I've seen how much you've grown, Alicia. You've shown that you can handle anything. You have the potential to do whatever you set your mind to. The question is, what do you want? Alicia thought for a moment, gathering her thoughts. I don't know yet, but I know that I want to be in control of my own future. I want to make a difference, not just for this family, but for myself. I want to do something that I can be proud of, something that feels like it's truly mine. Dominic nodded, as though he had been expecting this answer. I knew you would say that, he said with a smile. You've always been someone who strives for more. I respect that. You've earned my trust, Alicia. And now, I want to help you take that next step. Alicia's heart skipped a beat. Was he offering her even more? What do you mean, sir? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic stood and walked over to the window, looking out over the estate. I want to offer you something, he said, turning back to face her. A position with more responsibility. A chance to lead in a way that goes beyond this estate. I want you to be a part of something bigger. Alicia's breath caught in her throat. Was he offering her the chance to leave the estate, to step into a world of her own making? I'm not sure what it will look like yet, but I want you to have that opportunity, Dominic continued. You've proven yourself, Alicia. Now it's time to take the next step. Alicia sat there, stunned. For so long, she had been content with the life she had carved out for herself, but now, with Dominic's words hanging in the air, she realized that there was so much more for her out there. She had spent so many years in the shadows, but now, she was being given the chance to step into the light. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Dominic smiled, his gaze warm. You don't have to say anything right now, but I want you to know that I believe in you. I've always believed in you. Alicia felt a surge of emotion as she looked at him. She had always thought of herself as small, as insignificant. But now, in this moment, she realized that she had the power to shape her own destiny. And with Dominic's support, she knew she could achieve anything. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I won't let you down. Dominic gave her a small nod, his expression soft. I know you won't. As he turned to walk back to his desk, Alicia sat there, her mind racing with possibilities. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free. The world was wide open, and she was ready to take it on. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was someone who could create her own future, and nothing could stand in her way. The following weeks were a whirlwind of changes for Alicia. With the opportunity that Dominic had given her, her life took a new direction. She had never imagined herself leaving the world she had known, but now, everything seemed possible. She worked tirelessly, diving deeper into the responsibilities she had been entrusted with. The estate was hers to manage in many ways now, and with each task, each new challenge, she felt a stronger sense of purpose. She had proven herself capable, and now, she was not just a maid, a servant in the Castellano family's world. She was a leader, but as much as she embraced her newfound position, she couldn't ignore the nagging question in the back of her mind. Was this really what she wanted? Alicia had spent so much of her life focused on surviving, on doing what was asked of her, that she hadn't really thought about what she desired. She had never allowed herself to dream, never thought about what might be possible beyond the boundaries of the estate. But now, with the freedom to choose, she was filled with uncertainty. What if this was just a stepping stone to something greater? What if she was capable of even more than what Dominic had offered her? Late one evening, as the house quieted down and the last of the staff finished their duties, Alicia stood by the large windows in her office. The mansion stretched out before her, the soft lights from the chandeliers casting a warm glow on the polished floors. The estate had become her home, but her gaze kept drifting toward the horizon. The world beyond those walls was calling to her, a reminder that there was more out there than just this place. She had been given a chance to change her life, but what did she truly want to do with it? The decision weighed heavily on her. As she stared into the distance, lost in thought, the door to her office creaked open. She turned to find Dominic standing in the doorway. "Alicia," he said, his voice warm but measured. "I didn't want to interrupt, but I wanted to check on you." Alicia smiled softly. "I'm fine, Dominic," she replied, though the uncertainty in her voice betrayed her words. Dominic stepped into the room, his gaze steady as he looked at her. "I can tell that something's on your mind," he said. "You've been working tirelessly, but I can see that you're conflicted. I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'm here for you." Alicia hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to express the whirlwind of thoughts running through her head. "I don't know what to do," she finally admitted. "You've given me so much, Dominic. I've grown more than I ever thought possible. But now that I have this opportunity, I'm not sure if it's enough. I don't know if this is where I'm meant to be." Dominic listened intently, his expression thoughtful. He walked toward her, standing beside her as she gazed out at the night. "Alicia, what I've seen in you isn't just your ability to manage tasks or keep the house running. It's your potential. I've always known that you were capable of so much more than what you were given credit for." He paused, looking at her with sincerity. "The question is, what do you want? What do you really want for yourself?" Alicia's heart raced at the question. It was something she hadn't allowed herself to consider, not truly. What did she want? She had always been told what to do, always followed the path others had set before her. But now, for the first time, the path was open. She could choose. She could decide. "I don't know," she whispered. "I've never thought about it that way." Dominic placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay not to know. This is your time to figure that out, Alicia. Whatever you choose, you're not alone in this. You've already proven that you're more than capable of making an impact here. But I also know that you have dreams beyond this estate." Alicia looked up at him, her chest tight with the weight of the emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel. "Do you think I could do something more? Something beyond this?" she asked softly. Dominic met her gaze with a steady look. "I know you can. The question is whether you're willing to take the leap and go after it." Alicia turned back to the window, her thoughts swirling. She had spent so many years afraid to dream, to believe that she could have more. But now, the future seemed within her reach. She had always thought of herself as someone who just worked hard to survive, to get by. But maybe she was capable of more. Maybe she could build something of her own. "I think I'm ready," Alicia said quietly, more to herself than to Dominic. "I'm ready to take that leap. I don't know exactly what it will look like yet, but I want to go after it. I want to do something that's truly mine." Dominic smiled, a proud expression on his face. "I knew you would say that," he said. "You've always had the strength within you. Now, it's about taking that strength and using it to create the future you want." For the first time in years, Alicia felt a sense of clarity wash over her. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was someone who had the power to shape her own destiny. "Thank you, Dominic," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have come this far without your belief in me." Dominic gave her a nod, his smile soft but genuine. "You did this, Alicia. I just helped you see it." As he turned to leave, Alicia stood there, her heart filled with gratitude and excitement. She had come so far, and now, for the first time in her life, she felt like she could truly move forward. She was ready to embrace the future, whatever it held. With Dominic's support, she knew she could face it head-on. And this time, it was her choice. Her future. Her time. The days that followed Alicia's decision felt like the beginning of something new. The weight of her choice, the one that had been brewing in her mind for weeks, had finally lifted, and with it came a sense of clarity she had never known. She no longer felt like she was drifting, unsure of what her future would hold. Now, she was in control, and the world felt open to her. The Castellano estate had been her home for years, and though she had gained respect and responsibility within its walls, Alicia knew that her true journey lay beyond them. It wasn't just the trust and the opportunities Dominic had given her. It was the strength she had discovered within herself, the courage to break free from the life she had been living and carve a new path. Her heart was racing with excitement and fear as she stepped into her office that evening, prepared to write a letter of resignation. It wasn't easy. The estate had been a refuge for her, a place where she had finally felt like she mattered. but she couldn't ignore the pull to do something more, something of her own making. As she sat down at her desk, she picked up the pen, the weight of it feeling heavier than ever. She had never imagined this moment, the moment when she would walk away from the familiar and step into the unknown. But she knew, deep down, that it was the right choice. She had to take this chance. She had to believe in herself. The letter came easily. It was straightforward, clear, and polite. Thank you for the opportunity, but it was time for her to move on. She read it over twice before placing the pen down, her heart pounding in her chest. It felt final. It felt right. As Alicia placed the letter in an envelope, her thoughts drifted to Dominic. He had been nothing but kind and supportive, offering her a chance that many others would never have. He had believed in her when no one else had, and he had given her the tools to succeed. And yet, she knew she couldn't stay, not because of him, but because of herself. She had to find out who she was beyond the estate, beyond the walls that had once defined her. She had to live for herself now. The next morning, Alicia entered the main hall with the letter in hand. The staff was busy with the preparations for another event, the familiar hum of activity filling the air. She moved through the crowd, her heart beating a little faster with each step. She had never felt so certain and so terrified at the same time. When she reached Dominic's office, she knocked softly before entering. He looked up from his desk, offering her a warm smile as she walked in. "Alicia, good morning," he said. "Is everything going well?" She hesitated, the letter in her hand feeling like a weight she couldn't ignore. There's something I need to talk to you about," she said, her voice steady but filled with a mix of emotions. Dominic's expression softened, and he stood from his desk. "Of course," he said, gesturing to the chair. "What's on your mind?" Alicia took a deep breath and walked toward the desk, placing the letter in front of him. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," she began, "and I've made a decision." She paused, meeting his gaze. "I'm resigning from my position here, Dominic." For a moment, there was silence. Dominic didn't speak right away. He simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Alicia's heart raced as she waited for his response. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but serious. "I see," he said, his gaze steady. "You've made your decision, then?" Alicia nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes, I've learned so much here, and I'm grateful for everything you've done for me. But I need to take the next step in my life. I can't keep living in the same place, doing the same thing. I need to find out who I really am, outside of this estate." Dominic was quiet for a moment, his eyes scanning the letter she had handed him. Then, he looked back at her, his expression softening. "I understand," he said, his voice low. "I've seen how much you've grown, Alicia, and I know that you're capable of achieving anything you set your mind to." His words hit her deeply, and she felt a wave of emotion rise in her chest. "I'll miss having you here," he continued. "But I also know that this is what you need, and I respect that. You've earned the right to choose your own path." Alicia's chest tightened as she tried to hold back tears. This was it. This was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. You've changed my life, Dominic. You've shown me that I'm capable of more than I ever imagined. I'll never forget that." Dominic smiled warmly, his eyes kind. "You've always had it in you, Alicia. I just helped you see it. And I have no doubt that you'll do amazing things." She felt a rush of gratitude toward him, for everything he had given her, for believing in her when she hadn't believed in herself. But more than that, for giving her the freedom to choose. "Thank you," she whispered again, this time with more meaning. Dominic nodded. "Good luck, Alicia. And if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. You'll always have a place here, no matter what." Alicia smiled, the weight of her decision settling in her heart. She had taken the leap. She was moving forward, and there was no turning back. She was ready for whatever came next. With Dominic's words echoing in her mind, she turned and walked out of the office, her heart light. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she was ready to find out. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She wasn't just someone's employee. She was Alicia Davis, and she was ready to make her own future. It had been a few days since Alicia made the hardest decision of her life, and now, as she stood in front of the vast, open space of her apartment, she felt both relief and fear. The letter of resignation she had handed to Dominic still felt fresh in her mind. She had never imagined herself in this position, stepping out of the world she had known for so long, ready to embrace an uncertain future. It was a world she had been part of for years, a world that had given her purpose, but one that also confined her. Now, the door was open, and it was time for her to step through. She had done it. She had taken control of her own life. Alicia had always been practical. She had always worked hard to survive, to provide for herself, to keep a roof over her head. But as she unpacked the few things she had brought with her to her new apartment, she realized that this was no longer just about survival. It was about living, truly living, for the first time. She had left behind the security of the Castellano estate, a place that had once been her refuge, but now it felt like a cage she had outgrown. The air in her new apartment was different. The space was small, but it was hers. There were no grand hallways, no marble floors, but there was something else, freedom. The thought of it sent a rush of excitement through her. This was her space to build, to shape, to call her own. Alicia took a deep breath as she looked around, taking in the unfamiliar but comforting surroundings. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead was uncertain, and she had no guarantees. But for the first time, she felt like she was the one in control. The next few weeks were filled with change. Alicia found herself exploring new opportunities, looking for work, meeting new people, and, most importantly, beginning to understand who she truly was outside of the role she had played for so long. She was no longer just the maid or the helper. She was Alicia, and she was ready to see what the world had to offer. She had always been driven, but now, that drive felt different. It felt like it had a purpose. She attended job interviews and networked with people who saw her for who she was, not just for what she could do. Every conversation felt like a small victory, a confirmation that she had made the right choice. One afternoon, while she was taking a break from looking through job listings, Alicia received a phone call. She hadn't expected it, but when she saw the number on her screen, she knew exactly who it was. Dominic. She had left the Castellano estate, but she hadn't left behind the bond they had built over the years. She took a deep breath before answering. Hello. Alicia. Dominic's voice came through, calm and familiar. How are you? Alicia smiled slightly. I'm good, Dominic. I've settled into my new place. I'm glad to hear that, he said. I wanted to check in with you, see how you're doing. I know you're embarking on something new, and I wanted to make sure you're okay. His concern for her was clear, and Alicia felt a warmth in her chest. She had left the estate, but that didn't mean she had to leave the connection they had formed. I'm doing well, she replied honestly. It's different, but I'm starting to get used to it. I've been applying to a few things, and I've met some interesting people. It feels like I'm on the right path. There was a pause on the other end, and when he spoke again, his voice was soft but sincere. I want you to know that I believe in you, Alicia. You've already done so much, and I know that whatever you decide to do next, you'll succeed. You've always had the potential. Now it's just a matter of going after it. His words hit her deeply. It wasn't just about the opportunities he had given her at the Castellano estate. It was about the belief he had shown in her as a person. Dominic had always treated her with respect, but more than that, he had helped her see herself in a way she never had before. She had always been someone's employee, someone's servant, but now, for the first time, she was the one making the decisions. Thank you, Dominic, she said, her voice thick with emotion. That means more to me than you know. You deserve it, he replied simply. And no matter where life takes you, remember you always have a friend in me. Alicia felt the weight of his words settle in her heart. She had made the right decision, and although there were still uncertainties ahead, she knew she had the strength to face whatever came next. She had spent so many years feeling small, unnoticed. But now, she had a future she could shape with her own hands. I'll never forget that, Alicia said softly. Thank you. As she ended the call and set the phone down, she stood by the window in her apartment, looking out at the city lights. The world seemed vast, full of possibilities she had never considered before. For so long, she had lived in the shadows of others. Now, she was ready to step into the light. Whatever the future held, Alicia was no longer afraid. She had a purpose, and for the first time, it was her own. The journey was just beginning, and she was ready to embrace it with open arms. It had been a few weeks since Alicia had left the Castellano estate, and every day felt like a new chapter in her life. The transition from the grand mansion to her modest apartment had been more challenging than she expected, but it was also liberating. She had always thought that leaving the estate would be the hardest part, but now, as she walked through the streets of the city, she realized that the true challenge lay in what came next. Alicia had been applying for jobs, meeting new people, and slowly finding her place in a world that was so different from the one she had left behind. There were moments of doubt, moments when she questioned whether she had made the right decision. But then, she would remember Dominic's words. "You've always had the potential. Now it's just a matter of going after it." That belief in herself, a belief she had never known before, was what kept her going. She knew she couldn't go back to the life she had known, not when she had so much more to offer. One afternoon, after a long day of interviews and networking, Alicia found herself sitting in a small cafe. The warm aroma of coffee filled the air, and she absent-mindedly stirred her drink as she reflected on her progress. She had been here for weeks now, in this new world, and it still felt like she was figuring it out. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized how far she had come. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into Dominic's office, uncertain of her own worth. Now, she was someone who knew what she wanted and was ready to go after it. She had been given opportunities, yes, but it was the work she had put in, the courage she had found within herself, that had truly made the difference. As she sat there, a thought occurred to her. She had always been driven by the need to survive, to make it through each day. But now, for the first time, she was thinking about thriving, not just surviving. She had goals, dreams she hadn't allowed herself to have before, and she was determined to see them through. Alicia's phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and saw a message from a name she hadn't expected to hear from so soon. Dominic. "I hope you're doing well, Alicia. I've been thinking about you and wanted to check in. Let me know if you have time to talk. Best, Dominic." Alicia felt a smile tug at the corner of her lips. She hadn't expected to hear from him again, but she realized that she had missed their conversations. Dominic had always believed in her, and even though she had left the estate, his encouragement had continued to echo in her mind. She quickly typed a response. "Hi, Dominic. I'm doing well. Thank you for checking in. I'd love to talk. Let me know when you're free." The response came quickly. "How about tomorrow afternoon? I have a window of time and would love to catch up." Alicia agreed, and soon enough, the next day arrived. As she walked to the cafe where they had agreed to meet, she felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. It wasn't just about catching up with Dominic. It was about the new Alicia, the one who was stepping out of her comfort zone, and she wondered what their conversation would bring. When she entered the cafe, she immediately spotted Dominic sitting at a corner table. He looked as composed as always, but there was a warmth in his eyes when he saw her. He stood as she approached, offering a genuine smile. "Alicia, it's good to see you," he said, his voice low but full of warmth. She smiled back, feeling the familiar sense of ease around him. "It's good to see you too, Dominic." They sat down, and for a few moments, the conversation was light. They talked about her transition, the new opportunities she was exploring, and the challenges she had faced. Dominic listened attentively, his expression thoughtful as she spoke. He asked questions, offered advice, but more than anything, he made her feel heard. It was clear that he genuinely cared about her success. After a while, their conversation shifted. "You know, Alicia," Dominic said, his tone becoming more serious. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about your decision to leave the estate." Alicia looked up, meeting his gaze. "And what do you think about it?" she asked, her voice curious. "I think it was the right decision for you," he replied, his gaze steady. "You've grown so much, and it's clear that you have the potential to do whatever you set your mind to. But more than that, I think you found something within yourself that you didn't realize was there." Alicia felt a rush of emotion. She had never truly realized how much Dominic had seen in her, how much he had believed in her. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Your belief in me has meant more than I can say. It's given me the strength to believe in myself." Dominic smiled, and for the first time, Alicia noticed something different in his eyes, a quiet pride, as though he was seeing her in a new light. "I always knew you had it in you," he said softly. "And I still believe in you, Alicia. Whatever path you choose, you'll succeed." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words settling in the space between them. Alicia felt something shift inside her. She had always thought she was just a servant, just someone who had to work to survive. But now, with Dominic's belief in her, she knew that she was more than that. She could shape her own future, and for the first time, she felt ready to do so. "I appreciate everything you've done for me," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I'm excited for what's to come. I'm ready to take the next step." Dominic nodded. "I know you are, Alicia. I know you are." As they parted ways later that afternoon, Alicia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had come so far, and now, the future seemed full of endless possibilities. It was time for her to embrace them fully, to step into her future with confidence, knowing that she had the strength to succeed. Whatever the next chapter held, Alicia was ready for it. Alicia woke up to a bright, sunny morning, the kind of morning that seemed full of promise. She had been living in her new apartment for a month now, and every day brought new challenges, new discoveries. The transition from the life she had known to this new world was still ongoing, but with each step, she felt more confident in the decisions she had made. She had spent years working, under others, confined by roles that told her who she was and what she was worth. But now, for the first time, she was forging her own path, and it felt freeing in ways she could never have imagined. Alicia had spent the last few weeks diving into her new work, taking on freelance projects, and attending networking events. It wasn't easy, but she had never been one to shy away from hard work. She had learned so much during her time at the Castellano estate, and now she was applying those lessons in a new context. The skills she had honed, organization, leadership, communication, were proving invaluable, and every day she was building something that felt like her own. But as she sat at her desk that morning, sipping coffee and checking her emails, a wave of uncertainty hit her. Despite the progress she had made, despite the accomplishments, there was still that lingering question in the back of her mind. Was she doing the right thing? She had made a choice to leave everything behind, to step out into the unknown. But now that she was here, she sometimes wondered if she had truly found the right place for herself. As if on cue, her phone buzzed. Alicia looked down and saw a message from an unknown number. She opened it, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the familiar name at the top, Dominic. "Hey, Alicia. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to check in. I've been thinking about you, and I hope everything is going well. If you have a moment, I'd love to catch up. Let me know if you're free." Alicia smiled as she read his message. It had been some time since they last spoke, but his words brought a sense of comfort she hadn't realized she was missing. Dominic had always been supportive, and even though she had left the Castellano estate, it was clear that he still cared. Without hesitation, Alicia typed a response. "Hi Dominic, I'd love to catch up. It's been a while. I'm doing well, adjusting to my new life. When are you free to talk?" The reply came quickly. "How about later today? I have some free time this afternoon. Let me know if that works for you." Alicia agreed, and later that afternoon, they set up a time to talk. When the call came, Alicia felt a mix of emotions. She hadn't realized how much she had missed talking to Dominic, how much his words had impacted her in the past. As soon as she answered, his familiar voice filled her ears. "Alicia, it's good to hear from you," he said, his tone warm and genuine. "How are you?" Alicia settled into her chair, a smile spreading across her face. "I'm good, Dominic. It's been a busy few weeks, but I'm adjusting. I'm finding my way in this new world." "I'm glad to hear that," he replied. "I know how big of a step it was for you to leave the estate, and I've been thinking about you ever since. You've always had so much potential, Alicia. It's good to hear that you're using it." Alicia felt a surge of emotion at his words. "Thank you," she said softly. "Your support has meant everything to me. I've learned so much from you, from the work at the estate, and now I'm trying to apply it all in this new phase of my life. But it's still hard. I sometimes feel like I'm just figuring it out as I go." Dominic's voice was steady, reassuring. "You're doing great. I've always known you had the strength to succeed, Alicia. It was never about what you did for me or the estate. It's about who you are, and I'm proud of the person you've become." Alicia closed her eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in. He had always seen her, truly seen her, in a way no one else had. And now, as she stood at the crossroads of her life, ready to step into a future she had never dreamed was possible, it was that belief in her that kept her moving forward. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Alicia said, her voice steady, "about what's next for me. I know I made the right decision by leaving the estate, but sometimes it's hard to let go of what I've known. I've been living in survival mode for so long that now, with the freedom to make my own choices, I'm not sure where to begin." It's okay to feel uncertain, Dominic said, his tone understanding. The hardest part is always the first step. But you've already taken it, Alicia. You've already shown that you have what it takes. Now, it's about trusting yourself and the path you've chosen. Alicia felt a sense of peace settle over her. The uncertainty, the fear of the unknown, was still there, but it no longer paralyzed her. She had already proven to herself that she could face whatever came next. Thank you, Dominic, she said, her voice thick with emotion. For everything. For believing in me. For showing me that I'm capable of more. You've always been capable, Alicia, he replied, his voice full of warmth. You just needed to see it for yourself. And now, I have no doubt that you'll go on to do great things. As the conversation ended, Alicia sat back in her chair, a smile tugging at her lips. The path ahead was still uncertain, but she no longer feared it. She was ready for it. She was ready for whatever came next. With Dominic's belief in her, and her own growing confidence, Alicia knew that her future was hers to shape. And for the first time in her life, that thought didn't scare her. It inspired her.